What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And as we all know, the NFL announced the 2023 regular season schedule this past weekend, and there's a lot to take away for the New York Giants. It's kind of a grueling schedule. They have a lot of primetime games. They have a lot of road games in succession early in the season. It's not an easy-looking schedule, but we want to dive into it today, kind of review it, preview it, and of course, give our take on where we think the Giants end up finishing in terms of their record after looking at the schedule. Now, of course, everything in football is a mystery, right? You can make a record prediction all the way in May and then all the way in January. You look dumb for the prediction that you made, even if it sounds really good at the time that you made it, because the NFL is a wild card. Any given week, the Giants could go into one of these games and they could face an injured opponent and make an upset. You never know, but we do want to take a look at it, kind of look at the teams that the Giants are facing off against, and try to predict where we think this team will land come the end of the regular season. So we're going to go ahead and dive into all that, but before we do, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review, and also comment down below your record predictions. We would love to read what you think the Giants are going to do this upcoming season. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend, and what are your initial thoughts on the New York Giants schedule?
I'm doing good, man. I mean, looking at the schedule, it's a tough one. The teams that we're facing are very legit. This is not going to be an easy schedule for us. We start off against Dallas. Arizona's a little bit in a rebuilding stage, so that might be an easier matchup for us. The 49ers, of course, they get to the AFC Championship game every single year, the NFC Championship game. Seattle's obviously up on the up and coming, and Geno Smith had a great year. The Dolphins are probably going to be really freaking good if Tua can stay healthy. The Buffalo Bills, obviously every year, Josh Allen's a freaking monster. Commanders are getting a little bit better. The Jets have Aaron Rodgers. The Raiders. The Cowboys obviously give us trouble every single season. And, the Packers, we'll see how they go. And look, this entire schedule is littered with really good freaking teams. And ultimately, the Giants have to be able to stand up and beat them. And I think that's kind of my message to fans right now is that I love the fact that we're in 5 primetime games. Why? Because if we can't win primetime games, how the hell are we going to win playoff games, right? How the hell are we going to go into the championship games? How the hell are we going to go win a Super Bowl if we can't beat a primetime game? We can't win in primetime. We have traditionally, over the last couple years, been very bad in primetime, and I think that we all know that. I mean, how many times have we sat there after a loss to the Eagles or Dallas or whatever team they put us in the 8:15 slot on Monday night or Thursday night, and we're sitting there like, for God's sakes, like we didn't even put up a fight. You know what I mean? Like we just got completely steamrolled. This is the chance for the Giants to turn that narrative around. This is the chance for them to say to everybody, we're freaking here, man. We are developing. We're up on the rise. We are, staying loyal to our players. We are building a successful culture. They're buying in. Our coaching staff is elite, and we're going to put our names on the freaking table. We're going to put our names in the freaking pot to be a contender in the future. And it starts with beating good teams in prime time. You can't always beat the shitty teams when it doesn't matter at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. You got to win those games too. Of course, they're important. But when if you really want to make it far in the postseason, you really want to make a name for yourself, you go into prime time and you kick some freaking ass. And that's what the Giants need to do. I'm tired of being bullied around and freaking steamrolled when it matters most on those tough games. And now it's time for us to change the narratives, turn the page, change the script, rewrite the book, because we have a good up-and-coming team. We just got some really nice pieces in Deontay Banks, JMS, Jalen Hyatt. We retained a lot of talent. We'll see what happens with Saquon Barkley. The offensive line's hopefully going to take a step forward with Evan Neal's development, and we can win these games, man. I want to go through them one by one. I mean, and keep in mind, guys, the teams on the schedule are tough because of their 2022 success, not because of their 2023 success. Things happen year to year in the NFL. You see teams take massive regression. You see teams take big steps forward. That's to say that we may not see some of these teams that are very exciting on the page now. They may not be that good. They may take steps backward. We don't know if Brock Purdy is going to actually perform well, if he's going to be a good quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. The rest of their team is very good, but their quarterback situation may be in limbo. Dallas, we don't know what they're going to look like. They're kind of in this weird transition phase. They don't know if they can trust Dak Prescott. The Commanders are going to go with Sam Howell, for God's sakes. They're probably going to suck. The Arizona Cardinals probably are going to suck with Kyler Murray's ACL injury. Seattle, who knows if Geno Smith can maintain the success he was on last year. He's done it for one season, guys. He could take a big step backwards. So people, a lot of fans or maybe opposing like analysts or just, people, third parties saying, the Giants are maybe underdogs in that game. I don't think that's true at all. I think that we have to wait and see because these teams could take big steps forward. Injuries happen. You don't know if they're going to lose a quarterback or, the same thing could happen to the Giants for what it's worth. But right now I'm pretty confident in our abilities. I think we're taking big steps forward, and it's time we put ourselves on the page and make sure that we can at least stay very competitive in those primetime games and show that we can compete against some of the best.
Yeah, listen, those primetime games are kind of everything for the Giants this upcoming season. First of all, the fact that they're given so many primetime games really shows the expectations that the Giants have this upcoming season. I think it demonstrates that the expectations have risen. After the success of the 2022 season with Brian Daboll and Joe Shane in their first season, the NFL is just as confident in this team as us fans are. And if they weren't so confident, they wouldn't place the Giants under 6 primetime games. Now, it's technically 5, but technically 6 because the 6th one being Christmas Day versus Philadelphia. It's at 4:30 p.m., so not a prime time, but since it's on a Monday, it's technically a prime time. But 6 primetime games is a massive number for the New York Giants. I mean, think about it. 2 years ago, not a chance the Giants were getting 6 primetime games. But now, with Daboll finding the success that he found last season, the NFL is pretty excited about this team, and so are we, and we all should be. And of course, let's go ahead and go through the games. Week 1, starting the season off on primetime at home, MetLife Stadium versus the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this is going to be a tough one. We always do, kind of over the past few years, struggle against Dallas. We haven't beaten them in a few years, and when we do, it's usually quite narrowly. But Dallas going into this year, we'll see how they perform in week 1. I think that if there's ever a time to kind of upset one of your divisional opponents, it's usually in week 1, right? I mean, it's the game that you prepare for like months just to get your season off to a good start. So the Giants will probably be preparing with the idea in mind that they need to beat Dallas in week 1 for several weeks leading up to that game. And I do think that a win there could be huge for the New York Giants. I mean, you beat Dallas in week 1 on primetime, you really set yourself up in center stage as true contenders from the start of the season, and it's really only uphill or downhill from there. I do think, though, that this Dallas matchup in week 1 is pretty crucial. So, Alex, quickly, before we move on to the Arizona matchup, how important do you think that it is for the Giants to start off their season with a win over a divisional opponent on primetime in week 1?
I mean, look, divisional opponents for the Giants are like our kryptonite the last couple of seasons, right? Like, we've had a lot of problems beating these teams aside from the Commanders, but like the Eagles, I mean, their roster is freaking ridiculous. Like, there's no other way to say that their roster is probably the best in football, and they continuously get better. And like, that's Howie Roseman just putting a genius display on. He looks like he's playing with high school GMs. It's ridiculous how they keep building this roster. But the Cowboys are a beatable team. Like, I fully believe that the Giants shouldn't have a problem beating Dallas, and I think the main reason that we've lost to them is because we just get in our own heads. You know what I mean? Like, we just don't make the plays when it happens. And like, we've been close in these games. Like, our offensive line has been the focal point of the kind of the decrease in overall efficiency. You look at the last couple of seasons, the Giants lost to Dallas because their defensive line destroyed us, right? Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, those guys inside. If our offensive line stands up and stands strong, we're going to beat Dallas. Like, that's really what it comes down to. It's offensive line versus defensive line. If we can protect Daniel Jones, we can open up running lanes for Saquon, whoever the hell's running the football for us next year, we're going to beat Dallas. Like, our defense is good enough. Their receivers, they have CeeDee Lamb, right? Dalton Schultz, did he sign somewhere else? I feel like he signed somewhere else in free agency. So like he did, right? So their tight end position's a little bit in flux. Dak Prescott, I don't trust that guy for shit. You know what I mean? CeeDee Lamb's their only guy. He's their guy. He's the one that's supposed to dominate. We got good cornerbacks. I trust Adoree Jackson or Deontay Banks to man up on CeeDee Lamb. On the outside, you got freaking Gallup, right? Deontay Banks on Gallup, like, I think that's a good matchup for us. I think that he can easily lock down Michael Gallup. When it comes to, like, of course, CeeDee Lamb's going to beat you, right? Like, he's CeeDee Lamb's one of the best receivers in football. But Adoree Jackson's a good matchup on him. I do like that matchup. I think that we can at least contain him to a degree. He may hit us for 100 yards, but if everybody else is pedestrian, you can live with CeeDee Lamb having a good game if everybody else is not performing well. So you obviously got to stop the run game. Their offensive line traditionally is pretty good, but they've also kind of been losing some pieces the last couple of years and trying to figure things out. I think they're a little bit worried about their offensive line this upcoming season. Obviously, their left tackle position is getting older. With Tyrone Smith. So I feel as though the Giants actually match up well against Dallas in the future. I don't think their defense is anything special. They have like really athletic corners and Trayvon Diggs and whatnot, but like I feel like we have enough speed and we have enough separators to perform well against them. And our kind of smaller guys like Wandale, I think will feast against their cornerbacks. So I do like the matchup there as well. But overall, like I think that we'll split the series against the Cowboys this year. I think that we'll dominate one of those games, and I'd love to do it in Arlington. I'd love to do it at their home stadium and just show Jerry Jones that we're freaking back and we're not getting pushed around anymore. We're laying it on the freaking field, leaving it all on the field, and we're kicking some Dallas ass. Like, I'd love to see that. I mean, I think we split it because we're not there just yet, but we're getting there and we're developing nicely. I think in the future it's going to be a lot more favorable for us. But I think that we do perform very well in both games. I think they just edge us out once offensively at the end there, and I think that we destroy them in one of those games. So that's kind of my take on the Dallas series.
Yeah, on the Dallas series, I think that there's a good chance we split it. Of course, I could see us getting swept once again because that's kind of been the theme of recent years, the Giants losing both games to Dallas and to Philadelphia. But I actually do think that this year the Giants have really taken a big step forward with their roster. I mean, they added a lot more firepower on offense. They made some big improvements to the defense, as you mentioned. So I do think that we should be able to split the series with Dallas this year. I think that there's a really good chance that the Giants start off their season with a win in week 1 on primetime at home versus Dallas. But then you take a look at these next few games, right? So you have week 2 versus Arizona. You mentioned that earlier. Arizona looking like they're in a rebuild. Kyler Murray probably not starting in that game. I can't imagine that he's back from that injury in time to play by week 2. But if he is, okay, you got to worry about Kyler Murray. But overall, the Cardinals, a pretty poor roster, a beatable team. The Giants should win that game. But then you look at weeks 3 and weeks 4. And I think this is where the schedule starts to get really, really challenging, in my opinion. And if you even take a look ahead to weeks 5 and 6, it gets even more challenging. Week 3, they're on the road. San Francisco 49ers, Thursday Night Football, another primetime game. Week 4, they're still on the road. Or actually, no, they travel all the way back home to MetLife Stadium to host Seattle on Monday night. Then they're at Miami in week 5, and then they're back up north at Buffalo on primetime once again, Sunday Night Football, week 6. So 3 of those 4 games in primetime under the big lights, and all 3 of those primetime games, and in fact all 4 of those games, very difficult games. The San Francisco 49ers made it to the NFC Conference Championship game. In my opinion, they're always going to be a good team no matter what, no matter who the quarterback is, the running back, anybody there, because of Kyle Shanahan. He is an excellent head coach, and he always finds ways to put that team in winning opportunities. So that 49ers game, Thursday Night Football, it's going to be a tough one. Then Monday night versus Seattle in week 4. I also think that's going to be a tough game. Last time we faced Seattle, things did not go as planned, but we were on the road. This year, we will be hosting Seattle. Maybe that makes a big time difference, but it is a Monday night game. Again, Giants don't necessarily play too well on primetime in recent years, but I do think that's going to change this year considering how many of them they have. But Seattle, I think that one could go either way. Miami in week 5, it's a road game. I'm excited for that one because I'll probably go to it, but I also think that's going to be a tough game. I think that, even if the quarterback situation is kind of a big question mark for them, they have a lot of offensive firepower. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they always have good backs in the backfield. It's a really, really good team there. And then again, week 6, traveling on the road to Buffalo, Sunday Night Football. That one's also going to be a real pain. Brian Dable versus the Bills. That's going to be the big storyline. I'm excited for that. His first time back in Buffalo since becoming the New York Giants head coach. But again, the Buffalo Bills, one of the best teams in football. That's going to be a really difficult matchup. So, Alex, that 4-game stretch with 3 primetime games and 3 road games, what are your thoughts on that? And how many wins do you think the Giants pull out of that? Again, 49ers Thursday night in week 3. Seattle, Monday night, week 4. On the road, 1 p.m. versus the Dolphins in week 5. And then on the road, once again, Sunday Night Football versus Buffalo. How do you think the Giants fare through that 4-game stretch?
I mean, look, I'll say this, right? I think that the San Francisco 49ers, their offense is going to be very dependent on Christian McCaffrey, right? So, and when their offense is dependent, when you have an offense that's dependent on a running back like that, traditionally they get hurt. McCaffrey is injury prone, like objectively injury prone. So I think that their defense is elite. but I think their offense is very dink and dunk style. If you can stop them, if you can put pressure on Brock Purdy, whoever's playing quarterback for them is going to be inexperienced, you can cause turnovers. Like, you can take advantage of that game. You can grab momentum. And I think the Giants did a really good job last year. If anything, they controlled the pace of games and they controlled the momentum swings at times, Like, aside from the games they got blown out in, they maintained their kind of ability to emerge victorious in these games. Like, they stayed in the game until the last second. A lot of times, like, they were losing by one possession, So I think, like, they can beat the 49ers. I actually feel like we can beat them. I think that our defense is good enough. Our pass rush is going to be very good. And I'm going to add another element in here. What did the 49ers do so well? They run the football really well. What did we just do this offseason? We built a really good run-stopping unit. We know we brought in A'Shawn Robinson. We brought in Raheem Nunez-Roche. You extend Dexter Lawrence. You bring in Bobby Okereke. And you have two corners on the outside in Adoree Jackson and Deontay Banks. And you're obviously having like really good slot corners as well. I feel like right now I'm confident that our run-stopping game is going to be much improved. And we can actually do some good stuff there. So I do feel like we can beat the 49ers. It's going to be a tough one, but I think that we can do it. The Seattle Seahawks, I definitely think we can beat the Seattle Seahawks. I think Geno Smith is bound to regress. I don't think he's going to get better than what he's last year. If anything, he replicates exactly that. And we could have beat them last year. We could have won that game. So I feel like we have a chance. I think that that's probably the more favorable one of any of these four matchups. But then the Dolphins, that is entirely dependent on Tua's health. If Tua is hurt, we're going to beat the Dolphins, right? And Tua gets hurt like every other week. So, I mean, right now I'd say there's a high probability he may not even be playing by week 5. And if that's the case, the Giants can definitely beat Miami. And ultimately, their defense is nothing special. I think their offense, obviously, they have Waddle. Obviously, they have Tyreek Hill. Their running backs are pedestrian. Like, I don't really feel like this is a game that we are expected to lose. I think it'll be competitive, and I think it's going to come down to ultimately, just winning that last drive. It's gonna be that last possession. Can the Giants score? Can they stop the Dolphins from scoring? That's what it's going to come down to. But I trust Wink Martindale. I think that you put pressure on Tua, he's going to make a mistake. But ultimately, you got to beat their offensive line, which is much improved over the last 2 seasons or so. So I do think that we can beat Miami. It's going to be tough. Buffalo, that's a really tough game. Like, Josh Allen is very good. Their defense is very good. Their offense is really good. Like, that's probably going to be the one that I say is most likely we lose. But then again, Brian Dable knows Josh Allen like the back of his hand. Like, he knows how to pressure him. He knows what to do to get in his head. Again, it's easier said than done. You know what I mean? Josh Allen he's kind of the backyard football guy that you can't really rattle him. He just kind of does whatever he wants and he destroys you. But last year we saw him take a lot of unnecessary opportunities. The Buffalo Bills fans were not happy with how the offense was being run. So I kind of feel like the Giants have a good competitive nature in this game. But kind of rounding out these big matchups here, I feel like the 49ers, we can beat them. I feel like our team actually matches up well against them. It's going to be hard, Debo Samuel, whatever. Like, it really depends on their quarterback play. We probably lose that game, but I feel like we can beat them. Like, in my head, I'm as a biased Giants fan, I feel like we can beat everybody. But I do think the 49ers are probably bound to take a step backward. I don't think Brock Purdy can run back. I think he was living off of the emotion at the time. I think Brock Purdy was feeding off of the run they were going on and everything. It's just, ultimately everything about what he was doing is simply, just kind of fueled by that run they were on at the end. But we'll see what happens, right? Like, I feel like we can win that game. Seattle, I feel like we can win that game as well. Miami, I definitely think we can win that game. Buffalo, I feel like that might be the one that we lose if there's anyone that I had to pick. But that kind of, rounds out those 3 primetime games, when the Giants do end up, finishing off week 6 against Buffalo.
Yeah, and then when you move on to the next portion of the schedule, I think that it's another interesting kind of swing of things here because you've got 2 home games in a row. You're going to face Washington. Of course, that's your home game against Washington. It's 1 p.m. week 7. And then a big ticket matchup that everybody's keying in on. I'm surprised that this one wasn't a primetime matchup. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on this, Alex. But Week 8, 1 p.m. versus the New York Jets. Now, a lot of fans really wanted this to be the season opener. Prime time, Monday Night Football. A lot of fans were asking for that, Giants versus Jets. This is definitely going to be an interesting matchup. The Jets finally looking good again for the first time in a long time. And we'll see how that pans out, of course. But Aaron Rodgers making his way to New York and facing off against the Giants in Week 8. That's going to be a big ticket matchup that I'm interested in. And then Week 9, they're back on the road. They're at Las Vegas. Darren Waller's homecoming game, his first time playing against the Raiders since, joining the New York Giants. I'm excited for that one. I think that Waller could put together a big game and make some big headlines, and that would be really exciting. And then week 10, here's your second Dallas matchup, 10 weeks without him. Then we go ahead and we face them on the road in week 10 at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I think those 4 games right there, that's a winnable stretch for the Giants. I definitely think they can beat the Commanders. I absolutely think they can beat the Jets. Again, the Jets are getting really good. Sauce Gardner is amazing. Aaron Rodgers is there now. They've got a great receiving core, but still, I think that's a beatable team for the New York Giants. And then you take a look at Las Vegas, also a very beatable team. Jimmy Garoppolo is their quarterback. Big question marks all across the board with that whole team, including the coaching staff. That's definitely a winnable game for the Giants on the road. And then week 10 against Dallas, another winnable game, but that one on the road as opposed to the week 1 game that is at home. In my opinion, I think that the Giants are going to pull out the week 1 game at home and then probably lose the road game versus Dallas. But I do think there's a good chance those two teams face off a third time this season once we get to the playoffs. However, taking a look at those 4 games, I think that all 4 of those are very winnable for the New York Giants. I could see Washington, Jets, Raiders, Cowboys. I could see the Giants pulling off all 4 of those wins. And then again, week 11, they will be facing Washington once again back on the road. A lot of road games in succession throughout this regular season. It's a tough schedule, but that stretch right there, that 4-game stretch, I feel like that is a very winnable portion of the schedule. Yeah, so when you take a look at that 4-game stretch there, Alex, Commanders, Jets, Raiders, Cowboys, looks pretty winnable to me. At least 3 of those games are extremely winnable. And 2 of them on the road, 2 of them at home. I think that might be the most winnable stretch on the Giants' schedule. But what are your thoughts on that 4-game stretch there? And, do you also think that's maybe the most winnable stretch on the Giants' schedule?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when you look at it, that's probably we're going to have to get a couple of wins. The Commanders, definitely a winnable game. We usually have pretty good success against them. The Jets are no joke, though, dude. Don't sleep on the freaking Jets. Their defense is straight up elite. Sauce Gardner is elite. DJ Reed, very good. And they have freaking Aaron Rodgers, man, and Breece Hall. Sick running back. They're going to be a good team this year. The Jets could low-key be one of those teams that goes from one of the worst to one of the best in one offseason just because of their quarterback difference. So don't sleep on them. I think that's going to be a really difficult game for us. And then the Raiders, they're in a weird spot. I don't necessarily think that the Raiders are going to be very good this year, so I think that's definitely a winnable game. Dallas, again, winnable game. Commanders, winnable. Patriots, winnable. Mac Jones has booty. Packers, winnable. Saints, winnable. Eagles, the week 16, that's tough. But I think from I'd say 7 to week 15, we probably can win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those games if we're lucky. I actually think the Jets might be the most difficult out of all of them, to be quite honest with you. But I do think that we have a good chance in the rest of those games to emerge victorious. What are your thoughts on the Jets side? I feel like they could be one of those teams that actually steps in and maybe competes for a championship this upcoming season.
I could see it happening. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a massive upgrade at the quarterback spot. They got a great duo of wide receivers there. They added some talent to the receiving core in free agency. They upgraded their offensive line, and their defense is disgusting. So I think that the Jets could definitely be contenders this year, at least for a deep postseason run. But it really all depends on how great Aaron Rodgers plays in this new environment. And, he's getting up there in age. Not that I'm predicting he's going to fall off or anything, but we'll see, man. We've seen the Jets do this before. We've seen them have experiments with, veteran quarterbacks, the Brett Favre experience. It went well for them. They made it deep into the postseason, never made it to the Super Bowl, obviously. So, history kind of repeats itself in some ways for the Jets. I do think that they'll be a good football team this year, but I do think that the Giants will have an opportunity to beat them. I don't think it's a team that we just can't beat. But looking at the next stretch of games on the schedule, you've got the Commanders on the road. You host the Patriots. I'm excited for that Patriots game. I think that one will be interesting. The Patriots look like they're on the decline. Look like they're on a downturn now after, decades of dominance. I think that's a winnable game for the Giants. I think both Commanders games are winnable for the Giants as well. The Commanders do have a good roster in many regards, but big question mark at the quarterback position. And honestly, I'm not too confident that the Commanders are going to be a great team this year. So I think that the Giants can honestly sweep them. And then here's another big ticket matchup that I want to hit on. Monday Night Football, Week 14, Green Bay Packers. So we had the Jets in, what was that, Week 10? Week 8, we're playing the Jets. And then we play the Packers, Aaron Rodgers' former team, in Week 14, coming out of a Week 13 bye. The Giants get an extra day of rest after the bye week as they play on Monday night. They should be well prepared for this one, to say the very least. You know, coming out of Week 12 versus the Patriots should be a winnable game. Hopefully they win that, go into the Week 13 bye, rest up, primetime Monday night matchup versus the Packers. Jordan Love, who knows how good he'll be? There's a chance that he stinks, and if he does, hopefully this will be a winnable game for the Giants. But Alex, keying in on that primetime game, the final primetime game versus before we get to our pseudo primetime game in Week 16 versus the Eagles. But Week 14, Monday Night Football versus the Packers. It's at home, which I think is a big part of the equation here. But that's one of the games that I personally have circled. I'm really excited for that one. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
You're talking about the Packers one? Yeah, so
Indeed,
the Packers
yeah.
one. The Packers. I think the Packers are going to suck. I think they're going to freaking stink. I think Jordan Love is going to suck. And that's my objective take. I think that Jordan Love, a lot of people will say, you know, the Packers are historically great at developing quarterbacks and letting them sit behind, you know, you get Brett Favre, you get Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Jordan Love is that. You know, I don't think he's either of those guys. I don't think he's going to be anywhere even remotely close to as good as Aaron Rodgers. You have to get so lucky to develop a player. And they have different coaches. They have different front office people. Like, their whole organization is different. You know what I mean? So when you're looking at it, I think that the Packers are going to be really bad. I think their defense is awful. I think their wide receiver core is awful. If you look at their wide receivers, they literally have nobody. They have nobody. They have Christian Watson and Romeo Dubes, right? Neither of those guys are even high-end wide receiver 2s. I think Romeo Dubes is probably a wide receiver 3 at this point. Christian Watson, he's got speed, but that's it. You know, that's really all he's got. And we liked him last year in the draft. And I think that, you know, his injuries definitely stood out, but I don't think that their offense is going to be very good. Of course, you have to stop Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. But aside from that, you know, their offensive line, they have decent offensive line, Bakhtiari and Jenkins, but their defense is not very good. I think that I feel pretty good about us beating Green Bay. I think that we beat them last year in London with Rodgers. I think this year we beat the hell out of him again with Jordan Love, because there's no way he's going to be anywhere close to Rodgers. You saw how bad Rodgers was last year because of the lack of support he had. The Packers got worse this offseason. Not only did they lose Aaron Rodgers, they lost some of their receivers, and, you know, including Alan Lazard, who went to the Jets. You know, they lost guys. They didn't get much better. If anything, they probably took a step in the wrong direction significantly. So I think the Giants steamroll them there. And then the Saints, they got Derek Carr now, right? So, like, you're looking at the Saints. I actually think the Saints could be decent. I think Derek Carr on a better team is probably going to be solid. I think the Saints are a good squad. You know, traditionally a serviceable defense at times. Like, you know, their offense is going to be pretty solid with Taysom Hill, and, you know, they have some good players. Alvin Kamara and Derek Carr could be really good together. You know, they have, you know, Marquise Goldston, Marquise somebody, Goodwin. I don't know. They have one of the Marquises. He's pretty solid. And then you obviously have the guy coming back from injury, Michael Thomas. So we'll see if he can actually make an impact at this point in his career. I think he's kind of washed, but we'll see what happens. You know, this Giants team, I think, matches up pretty well. They're getting better. I'm pretty optimistic about their upcoming season. I think the Packers are a very winnable game. I think we can beat the Saints. It's more so like, can you put pressure on Derek Carr and force mistakes? But then the Eagles, the last 2 games of the season, we always play the Eagles late in the year twice, and it always annoys me because they're so good, it like demoralizes us sometimes right before the playoffs, which kind of sucks. But if we could go in there and win one of those games against the Eagles, I think the confidence it would give us going into the postseason would be invaluable. You know, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, listen, I think those are your toughest matchups on the schedule, are divisional matchups versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Week 16, that's a primetime game, Monday, 4:30 p.m., Christmas Day. That's going to be an interesting matchup, to say the least. On the road, Lincoln Financial Field. That game might just suck for Giants fans. That might be the game that ruins everybody's year. Christmas Day, if we lose, if we get demoralized in Philly on Christmas Day, 4:30 p.m., man, that would just be horrific. That would be the worst day of my life. There's nothing that I hate more than the Philadelphia Eagles, and if I have to watch my team lose to them on Christmas Day, my favorite holiday, I might just cry. I might have a really, really depressing Christmas. So hopefully the Giants don't do that to me. Hopefully they go ahead and win that game, pull off the upset. But as you mentioned, we play them twice pretty much in succession. We've got Week 16 at Philadelphia. Then we're back home for Week 17, playing the Rams on New Year's Day. I think that's also an interesting matchup. Should be very winnable. The Rams were terrible last year. They didn't make a bunch of improvements this offseason. In fact, you could argue they got a little bit worse. And then Week 18, once again, Philadelphia Eagles. The time to be determined. That could turn into a primetime matchup. Don't sleep on that, because if this is a playoff race and the Giants are fighting for, a wild card spot, or if they're fighting for winning the division versus Philadelphia, I would not be shocked to see the NFL flex that game into primetime, get everybody's eyes on it, and see who wins the division if it really does come down to that. So Giants versus Eagles, Week 18 at home. That's one that it might end up being a must-win game for the New York Giants. And you don't want must-win games against the Eagles if you're the Giants, because you haven't beaten the Eagles very much in recent years. So I don't like the fact that we're once again finishing the year against Philadelphia. We got lucky last year. We clinched the postseason berth in Week 16, I believe it was. So we had a couple of weeks to not really do much, or Week 17, whatever it was. We didn't have to go into Philadelphia Week 18 and need a win. But unfortunately, the schedule makers have once again put us in a position where that might happen. We might have to beat Philadelphia to make it to the postseason. And again, I don't really want that, because the Giants haven't had a whole lot of success against Philly in recent years. But Alex, before we wrap, those final three matchups, Christmas Day, Philadelphia Eagles, then you've got the Rams, then you've got the Eagles again. It's a tough final ending to the schedule. You got that game against the Rams there where it's kind of a buffer. That should be your easier game, but also don't sleep on Matt Stafford coming back healthy this year and this team maybe being good again. Cooper Kupp will be healthy once again. Sean McVay is still one of the best coaches in the NFL. Don't sleep on that Rams game either, but you got a couple holiday matchups there, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, and then, of course, you finish off the season at home against Philadelphia. What are your thoughts on that final three-game stretch?
Like you said, you get a buffer with the Rams, but the Eagles, man, like you said, this could end up being the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. The Giants have a pretty tough schedule on paper compared to the 2022 opponents, if you look at them in that lens. But, the Eagles, that's the team that you got to beat once to show that you can beat that team. You know what I mean? If the Giants can walk away, play their hearts out, win that game against the Eagles, one of those two games, that shows us that we can not only win in primetime, but we can win against really good opponents. And I think that that's what's going to be the difference between the Giants making it to the playoffs and actually having a chance, or them making it to the playoffs because they beat up on bad teams. And, the Giants making the playoffs this year is going to be difficult because of our schedule, but it's also going to justify our improvements. It's gonna show us that we are good enough to compete against this level of talent, and I think that that's ultimately what I want. I don't want to skirt into the playoffs because we beat up on bad teams. I want to make the playoffs because we had some really good games against some very good teams, and we emerged victorious, and we had some big wins in the last couple of minutes, and Daniel Jones stepped up and showed his heroics. That's what I want to see, because that's what happens in the Super Bowl, guys. That's what happened in this most recent Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes, the heroics. If you don't have that nature, if you don't have that clutch factor, there is no way in hell you're winning a Super Bowl, guys. Like, we have to be objective about that. We need Daniel Jones to step up. We need someone to step up. Big defensive plays, big moment, like momentum shifting moments. And at the end of the day, the Giants aren't going to get that unless these guys take significant steps forward, and we beat good teams in prime time. So Eagles, yes, it's a difficult ending, but that's where you put it. That's where you leave it all on the field. That's where you leave your mark. That's where you tell the NFL we're here and we're trying to make an impact and we're going to do some good stuff. And you can't sleep on us in the playoffs. You can't look past us and say we can easily get past the Giants. You got to beat us. You got to go into New York, or we have to go into your home, and you got to battle, because we're coming to fight. And that's the kind of Giants team I want to see moving forward. Do I want to play the Eagles twice at the end of the season? Of course, and I'd love to spread it out because I think that's just reasonably better for the schedule. But with that being said, we got to beat good teams. That's how you win Super Bowls. You got to beat good teams. And if the Giants want to win a Super Bowl, they got to beat the Eagles. So we got to prove it. And this is obviously an opportunity for us to do that at the end of the season.
Yep, can't be a good team unless you beat good teams. Can't win playoff games unless you beat good teams in the regular season. I mean, it's well documented. Like, you have to win some of those crucial games down the stretch. So before we wrap, though, Alex, record prediction. For me, I'm taking 10 wins. I think they go 10-8 this year. A little bit of an improvement last year based on last season's schedule. Listen, 9-7-1 last year was incredible considering the lack of talent that the Giants had, but they did have a pretty easy schedule. This year, more talent, second year under Brian Daboll, but a much more difficult schedule, the third hardest schedule in the NFL based on 2022 win percentages. So I want to say like, hey, the Giants are going to be a much better team, win 12, 13 games. But realistically, this is a brutal schedule. The schedule makers did not do the Giants any favors in terms of when they're playing at home, when they're playing on the road, all that stuff in between. So I think this is going to be a tough schedule. The Giants, I think, finish with 10 wins and do make the postseason for the second year in a row. But what are your final predictions?
I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic. I'm going to go with 11 wins. I'm going to go with we beat Dallas in week 1. We beat Arizona in week 2. We beat Seattle in week 4. We beat Miami in week 5. We beat the Commanders in 7. Raiders in 9. Dallas in 10. I think we sweep Dallas this year, which would be freaking awesome. We beat Washington in week 11. The Patriots in week 12. And I think that we beat the Packers in week 14. And I think that we beat the Rams in week 17. So we got 11 wins there. I think that's where I land. I think that we can beat all those teams. Maybe you swap the Saints for Miami or something like that. We beat the Saints and we lose to Miami. You could kind of, mix and match those a little bit. But I think that our ceiling is 11 wins. I think our floor is 8 wins. That's where I would say. That's where I kind of see our margin lying.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. 8 to 11 wins, somewhere in there. Again, I'm thinking 10. I think we'll finally crack double digits for the first time since 2016, and I'm really hoping that I'm right about that. But listen, it's going to be a fun New York Giants team to watch regardless. I'm really excited for this upcoming season. Year 2 of Brian Dable. You've got Saquon Barkley coming back on the franchise tag, but you've got Daniel Jones just signed to this big extension. Darren Waller coming in. New talents on defense and offense from the rookies. It's going to be a fun year. I'm excited for this upcoming season. So I'm predicting 10 wins, but I want to hear your predictions down below in the comment section. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.